In the past week, there has been a lot of talk on social media about Davante Adams and if he would actually end up returning to Green Bay. And part of this was started because he went on to Kane Adams' show Up and Adams on January 10th and was asked some questions about whether or not he would be willing to return to teams he's already played for. So I'm going to play that from a few days ago. But then he also had some comments today that added a little more fuel to the fire when it came to this idea of him potentially returning to Green Bay. And then I'm going to give sort of my reasons for why I think this could or couldn't happen, some pros and cons, things like that. So first off, this is from January 10th. This is a short audio clip from Kay Adams' show, Up and Adams.
Allowed to return to a team you've played for?
Yeah.
What do you mean? You would not rule out. Like, you take a phone call from, I don't know, a team that rhymes with Schmackers. You're not like, yeah. a team playing this weekend. We're not ruling it out.
You can't rule anything out. I got a lot of love for all the organizations I've played for, so I wouldn't rule out anybody. I mean, obviously I think that there's some saltiness from maybe some of the fan bases that I've been with because of not understanding, what I was going through and my, and the decision that I decided to make for my own personal career, which somehow hurt everybody. But I would say, I keeping my mind open to, wherever. Obviously the Packers are a great team. And if they felt like that was a possibility for me, and like I said, I'm still with the Jets, so I can't be out here talking about going to other teams.
Of course.
Obviously, this is going to be an interesting offseason, one that's been different than any one that I've had in the past. So talking about potential landing spots is obviously a little bit different this time. So I don't know. We'll see, but definitely keeping an open mind.
So Davante Adams not ruling out this possibility that he, could potentially return to a team he's played for before. And he brings up the Packers and he says, if the Packers felt like this is a possibility, he sort of doesn't full on finish the sentence. But it's no shock why, Davante Adams returning to Green Bay has now heated up at least the conversation. And let me read this quote from earlier today on Kay Adams' show. He was discussing the Packers, some of their needs, their receiver room, the fact that they have some injuries there with the Dobbs concussion, Christian Watson and his ACL. And he said this, quote, "It's looking right now like obviously they might need some receiver help in one way or the other just based off of what they have available. And, maybe a veteran or something in there. I don't know. We'll see." And so when you add those two videos together, it's like, okay, Davante seems like he really would welcome a return to Green Bay. And I, for one, as a Davante Adams fan, as a Packers fan, from a fan perspective, I just love Davante Adams, and it would be pretty awesome to see him back in Green Bay. But of course, there are so many components to this possibility, so I want to dive into it a little bit. And I think when you look at Davante Adams, the fact that he is still playing at a top-tier level, even at his age, now 32 years old, he hasn't really fallen off a cliff in any way. And I think that when you have receivers, when you have players starting to get to this age, you do start to have concerns about, okay, how long are they going to play at this top-tier level? And so I do think that, when you look at the fact that he is an established veteran receiver, he's still playing at a high level. You look at his stats the past 3 years after leaving Green Bay. His production, hasn't really gone down in a massive degree. Now, his 2022 year was much more productive than 2023. I think quarterback play had a large part to do with that, losing Derek Carr, who's better than what the Raiders had last year. And then 2024, going from the Raiders to the Jets, a little bit of a shaky situation going from Las Vegas to New York. And so he's still playing at a high level. So that is not a concern for me, at least right now. Who knows, how much longer he's going to play at this level. But right now he's still playing great football. And I think for the Packers, when you look at their receiver room, they do have a ton of youth, and they've had a ton of youth in that receiver room for a few years now. And I think that when you look at the guys they have, Dobbs, Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, a few other guys, I do think that there's a lot of talent there. And when you look at some of the statistics, they are some of the best route runners in the NFL. Dobbs is up there. Christian Watson is up there. Jaden Reed, not quite as high. But one guy hasn't really risen way above the rest. And I don't think that necessarily is because the Packers don't have the talent in the room. I think that, when you have these guys getting open at high rates, part of me wonders, okay, well, maybe Jordan Love needs to do better at, finding these open guys. So I think that the blame could go on both sides partially, but also when you have, the amount of talent you have here, the ball is going to naturally get spread around. And I think it's also important to remember that the Packers still had a top 10 offense. It's not like their offense was a bottom tier offense this year. They were top 10 in scoring. And, outside of those games against some of the top teams, their offense, still played pretty solid. And even in some of those games against the Lions, put up 31 when they lost. Against the Vikings, put up 25. But when you see, what happened against the Philadelphia Eagles, the way that the Eagles defense just completely shut down the Packers and their passing attack, it did make me wonder if, having a veteran guy in there could be beneficial, just because if you had Davante Adams out there, I think that you could rely on him a little bit more just because of that consistency, just because he's already proven it for a long time. And I think that these Packers receivers are very talented, but having a veteran like Davante, I don't think that could hurt. So I don't think it's a necessity to add a veteran receiver. I think we saw with what the Packers' young receivers did this year, they're still one of the best units offensively in the NFL. But against top-tier teams, you do wonder if maybe adding a guy like a Davante could be beneficial. Now, it's not all, positive and, just a 100% Gutekunst should make this move. I think there's a lot of reasons why a move should not be made, but here's some reasons not to sign Davante Adams. He is 32 years old, and so as I brought up a second ago, we do not know how much longer he's going to play in the NFL. And Brian Gutekunst has typically been the kind of guy, the kind of GM to move off of players, a year before they, start to decline, or a year before you maybe think that the Packers would move off of a guy. And considering he already traded away Davante Adams a few years ago for a number 1 and number 2 pick, I just find it pretty hard to believe that he would want to trade for a 32-year-old receiver, because on the one hand, Davante could come into Green Bay, put up some big numbers, but you don't know how much longer it's going to last. It'd be a very much of a short-term signing. And then if we do look at the financial implications, if you look at his current cap hit on the Jets, $38.25 million in 2025, $38.34 million in 2026. And I do know that when guys get traded, it does mess with the cap, and sometimes the cap goes lower. Sometimes teams pay off some of their contracts to trade them away. And so I'm not exactly sure what the Packers cap hit, if Davante was traded there, what it would be. I'm going to try to dig deeper and try to figure that out. But regardless, you're going to have to put up some money with Davante, and he's going to cost more on the cap, I would assume, than lots of the guys you have on rookie deals. And so when you add those few together, and also you'd have to probably send some draft capital. You'd have to trade for Davante because he is under contract with the Jets. And so on the one hand, Davante could come in 2025, maybe even 2026, and put up some big numbers for Green Bay, no doubt about that, and it would help to have a veteran. But when you add in the potential downside, 32 years old, the financial implications, sending over draft capital, I think that either way, I could see why it would make sense not to trade for him. Also, if you're really going for it, if Gutekunst did think that this roster is a veteran receiver away from competing for a Super Bowl, then maybe you take a chance like this. So honestly, I don't have a very strong opinion on this one. I'm not like, with the Packers need Davante, no doubt. I think that there are a lot of potential concerns if you did bring him into Green Bay. And as I said, with Gutekunst already trading him away for draft capital, with him being 32 years old, if I had to guess, I would say Gutekunst would not make this move. It's going to be interesting to watch what the Packers do at receiver if they want to do something. I still think they have a very solid room. I think if they did nothing all offseason, I wouldn't be terribly upset, because I really do believe in some of these guys when they're healthy. The question is, how is Christian Watson going to do when it comes with his ACL tear? I think Romeo Doubs is a very solid receiver. I even think that if he got more looks, he could produce at a much higher level. And so I think the Packers do have a lot of decisions to make when it comes to coming out of this next season. But those are my thoughts. If you want more Packers content, feel free to subscribe down below, and I'll see you guys next time.